Kate's giving me
What's
the
all
eye.
right about it?
So here we go.
Here we go.
Later on, we're going to have a map, so that's why we've got that going there. Turn to Jeremiah chapter 47, and we're going to finish this book tonight. The last couple of chapters are, it's pretty quick for us to go through. So we'll have a word of prayer, and then we'll start. Father and God, we're grateful tonight that we can be in your house and thankful for your word. I pray tonight as we finish this book of Jeremiah that we would be mindful of the years of faithfulness that he gave to you, and you had no promises for him. Nothing that would suggest that he would be successful on any way, shape, or form. And still he remained faithful to you. May that be a reminder to us that we serve you not because of what we receive, but we serve you because of what we have received in your Son Jesus, and whose name I pray tonight. Amen. Chapter 47, this is a nation that is very close in proximity to Egypt. The Philistines. And the Philistines lived in the land of promise, and they were the enemies of God. Spiritually, they could be identified as those who we would consider to be nominal Christians. I mean, when the world would look at them, they would think, oh, those people are Christians. Because they live in the land of promise. See, they're foolers. Egyptians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks would look at Philistines and they would say, oh, these must be Israelites, because that's where they lived. But they were enemies of God. And they hurt the kingdom. Philistines constantly hurt the kingdom. People who appear to be Christians hurt the kingdom. And so God is speaking to them here. And Susie, are you ready? We're in Jeremiah 47. Jeremiah 47.
You're cleaning my glasses.
I know, so I thought you would probably be ready.
47.
The first 4 verses.
This is the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet concerning the Philistines before Pharaoh attacked Gaza. This is what the Lord says. See how the waters are rising in the north? They will become an overflowing torrent. They will overflow the land and everything in it, the towns and those who live in them. The people will cry out. All who dwell in the land will wail at the sound of the hoofs of galloping steeds, at the noise of enemy chariots and the rumble of their wheels. Fathers will not turn to help their children. Their hands will hang limp. 4 also? Mm-hmm. For the day has come to destroy all the Philistines and to cut off all survivors who could help Tyre and Sidon. The Lord is about to destroy the Philistines, the remnant from the coast of Caphtor.
And even though the word Palestine comes from the word Philistine, when the Babylonians came in and destroyed this whole area, that was the end of the Philistine nation. They don't exist today. They're gone completely. You could not find a Philistine if you wanted. They're just gone, extinct. So, chapter 48, this is a group of nations now. Moab, Ammon, Edom, Damascus, and Kedar or Arabia. And they represent something else in the Christian life, because these 5 nations have a direct link to Israel. They are the flesh that we as Christians battle constantly. They're not a part of the spiritual kingdom, but they're a part of us. You understand what I'm saying? Anger, impatience, jealousy, lust. That's a part of us, and we wish we didn't have that. Wouldn't life be so much easier if sin wasn't dwelling in our lives? Well, it was the same for these people. They were constant enemies of God. And so this is what he's going to say to them. In fact, Moab and Ammon occupy all of chapter 48. And so let's just go down to chapter 48 and read verse 11. Norm?
Moab has been at rest from youth, like vine left on its dregs, not poured from one jar to another. She has not gone into exile, so she tastes as she did, and her aroma is unchanged.
Who's got King James? Anybody? Or Revised Standard? Yeah. Yeah, get the Revised Standard version while you're looking that up. And I'll just jabber while you're looking it up. Moab and Ammon have a peculiar place in the life of Israel because how are they related? They were Lot's kids. And Lot's kids, his first group, we don't know if he had anything besides the 2 girls or not. If he did, they didn't come with Lot and his family at the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So where was Lot's wife? She turned into a pillar of salt. I think it was around Morton. So it was Lot and his 2 girls. And man, that environment of Sodom and Gomorrah had so warped them that they didn't see anything wrong with extending their prodigy, their generations, with their dad. And so one gave birth to Moab, one gave birth to Ammon. And
They must have thought it was wrong, though, because they got him drunk to do it.
well, maybe he knew it was wrong because he had spent a lot of time with Abraham. So that they were determined.
Right.
And he might have been resistant. And so they used a little persuasion. Okay, you got it? Read verse 11 in the Revised Standard Version.
Moab has been at ease from his youth and has settled on his lees. He has not been emptied from vessel to vessel, nor has he gone into exile. So his taste remains in him, and his scent is not changed.
Yes, we missed that in the New American Standard and the NIV and all those other newer ones because political correctness. We're real worried about some of the language that King Jimmy used, because he's translating it directly from Hebrew. And when Nicole read, he has settled on his lees, anybody have any idea what that is? Because we don't talk that.
It's a winemaking reference.
No.
Okay.
But that was a good answer, but that's not what lees means.
Yeah, the
Well,
dregs in the jar
the
and
lees
everything,
from
yes.
wine is that which settles after the wine is completed fermenting.
Is it leaves like L-E-A? No.
LWES.
Lees.
Oh, yeah, it's not, he's not talking about leaves.
No.
Well, it was his baby-making stuff.
No, he's resting on his rear.
Oh,
I was going to say, from the way he was just.
Yeah, he was resting on his rear. But they didn't want to say that. They didn't want to translate it that way, so they just took it out. And
well, they call donkeys by that name. They just say that about him.
in fact, they don't even go close to that. Just as Moab has been at ease, well, he's been resting on his ease, and then what it's talking about here is because Moab was so off the beaten track. You've got Edom, and we saw pictures of the place where these people lived. If you ever saw Indiana Jones and nope, they were looking for the chalice. Was that the final crusade? Indiana Jones in the last crusade, and they come to Petra. Of course, they don't call it that in the movie, but the shots they took of this front that had been hewn into the mountainside is real. These people were cave dwellers, and they lived in this mountain area, and they were so arrogant because nobody ever touched them. They were isolated, and they lived in this mountain area. So when nations would go to war and they would conquer Jerusalem over and over and over again, Moab was just untouched. And they became convinced that it was because of their prowess, you know, their intelligence and all of that. And so they had never been attacked. And it says when his taste remains in him, what it means is his mouth had never been dry because of fear. You ever been so afraid that your mouth just turns to cotton? Whew, boy. Yeah. And the scent is not changed, meaning they have never sweat with terror. Because when you sweat, your scent changes. That's why they invented deodorant. So he's got this thing here, and go down, Norm, go down to verses 29 and 30.
We have heard of Moab's pride, her overweening pride and conceit, her pride and arrogance, and the haughtiness of her heart. I know her insolence, but it is futile, declares the Lord, and her boasts accomplish nothing.
Yes. Yes. This problem with pride is so predominant and has been for everybody, but when it comes to the Christian life, man, we just struggle with pride. And it doesn't help, but it does give us a visual. Sin in its ugly arrogance is very prideful. And one of the most ugly arrogance that we see in our world today concerning sin is homosexuality. And the entire month of June was designated as what month? Pride Month. And do you think that God doesn't get it? He wrote it back here in Jeremiah. When you are so arrogant about your sin, it comes out as pride. And we have a group of people today that are so arrogant in their sin that they call it pride. Pride. It's not a good thing. A young woman went to her preacher and she said, "Preacher, I have a besetting sin and I want your help. I come to church on Sunday and I can't help thinking I am the prettiest woman in the congregation. I know I shouldn't think that, but I can't help it. And I want you to help me with it." And the preacher said, "Mary, don't worry about it. In your case, it's not a sin, just a horrible mistake."
Is that possible? Could you possibly say that they were self-contained and arrogant in their lives because they never had no Betty come and fight them? No other company?
Yeah, that's exactly it. They were just sitting around on their on their leaves because they'd never had to get up and fight. And God said, you're mistaken. You think that you are impregnable, that you can't be defeated, and you're going to be. So now let's go down to chapter 49, and Nicole, read verses 6 through 10.
But after that, I will restore the fortunes of the Ammonites. This is the Lord's declaration. About Edom, this is what the Lord of armies says. Is there no longer wisdom in Teman? Has counsel perished from the prudent? Has their wisdom rotted away? Run, turn back, lie low, residents of Dedan, for I will bring Esau's calamity on him at the time I punish him. If grape harvesters come to you, wouldn't they leave some gleanings? Were thieves to come in the night, they would destroy only what they wanted. But I will strip Esau bare, I will uncover his secret places. He will try to hide, but he will be unable. His descendants will be destroyed along with his relatives and neighbors. He will exist no longer.
Edom was a descendant of Esau. And Esau belonged to who? Yes. And he had a brother, Jacob and Esau. They were together, see, in that tribe, sons of Isaac, but took two different paths. And over the course of the centuries, Edom also became extremely proud and was a constant enemy of Israel. In fact, God had asked Saul to eliminate the Edomites and the Ammonites, and he wouldn't do it. And later on, they're going to cause problems because a guy named Haman is a descendant of this group of people, and he tries to exterminate the Jews. And Esther, thank you, Esther, comes in and saves them. So God promises Edom that they are going to be eliminated in verse 10. And that's exactly what happened. they also were taken away from the stage of history and never heard from again. And the last two nations in this group are in chapter 49 and verse 23. You might as well read that too, Nicole.
Me? Okay. About Damascus, Hamath and Arpad are put to shame, for they have heard a bad report and are agitated, like the anxious sea that cannot be calmed.
And then verse 28.
About Kedar and the kingdoms of Hazor, which King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon defeated. This is what the Lord says. Rise up, attack Kedar, and destroy the people of the east. Oh, that's it.
In these two, Damascus and Arabia, when we think in generalized terminology of these people, we most usually think of them as Bedouins when we think about Arabians. And Bedouins were, how else would you describe them? Nomads, gypsies. They just travel place to place to place. There is a restlessness in our being that keeps us from being content. And you might know some people living a Christian life that are just so unhappy because they have no contentment. They move from place to place, sometimes physically. And I've been here long enough that I've seen them make the circuit. They started here, and then they were gone, and they were there, and there, and there, and there, and then they're back. And sometimes they're real surprised when they come back, I'm still here. Because they walk through the door and they say, oh, you're still here. Sorry about that. But it's an affliction. And what God is saying here in this physical analogy to our spiritual self is we struggle with this as Christians. And what's the answer? What's the answer? How do we become content?
Just to be happy with God.
Yes. Yes. Remember that old song, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus? And the things of this earth will grow strangely dim. Yeah. When we have our eyes focused on other things, that's where the restlessness comes in. And that was the same. These people were a part of God's heritage. I mean, they were children of Abraham, but their eyes weren't on God. And because of that, they were gone. Now, there's one caveat here, interestingly enough, in chapter 49, and Renee, would you read verses 34, 35, and 39?
All right. This is the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet concerning Elam early in the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah. This is what the Lord Almighty says. See, I will break the bow of Elam, the mainstay of their might. Yet I will restore the fortunes of Elam in days to come, declares the Lord.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So Elam today is the land of Iran. So it's not eliminated. And going back to the Edomites and the how they built that city in the rocks. Not only were they real prideful, but they had a reputation as being really smart, had a lot of wisdom. And the carvings in that rock are really ornate. And sometimes we get too smart for our own britches.
Yeah, we're doing that a lot in science right now.
Yeah. We just think, oh, we know it all, and we don't know a thing. Bob went to a psychiatrist, and he said, Doc, I've got trouble. Every time I get into bed, I think there's somebody under it. And when I get under the bed, I think there's somebody on top of it. I spend all night up, down, up, down, up, down. I'm not getting any sleep. He says, I think I'm going crazy. And the doctor said, just put yourself in my hands for a year, and I'll have you cured. And he says, well, how are you going to do that? He says, come to me 3 times a week, and I'll get rid of all your fears. Well, that sounds good, but how much do you charge? $100 a visit. $100 a visit? Well, I'll go home and think about it. 6 months later, the doc met Bob on the street. And he said, hey, Bob, you never came back. What happened? And Bob said, well, for $100 a visit, I had a friend that cured me for free. And the doc looked at him and said, what? Well, how could he do that? He said, he cut the legs off my bed. So we'll end this here. Job chapter 28. Go back to Job chapter 28. Talking about wisdom. And Renee, read that when you got it.
28 what?
28:28.
Oh. And he said to man, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to shun evil is understanding.
Who's talking?
I think Job is.
No, God to Job.
In verse 28 of chapter 28,
Oh, it must be God.
God's talking to Job.
Yeah.
So I think that was pretty good advice.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. What does God say that wisdom is? Fear of the Lord. Now go over to Proverbs chapter 1. You probably could quote this one. Psalms, Proverbs. And Renee, read verse 7.
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline.
Yeah. That's the same thing that God said to Job. Proverbs 1:7. Proverbs 1:7. And now turn over to Romans chapter 1. And Paul tells people how to get smart. Well, no, really, he says this is how we lose our wisdom. And wow, if this doesn't sound like it came right out of Romans 1, verses 18 through 32. Would you read that, Chuck?
For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and all righteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God had made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his element, eternal power, and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks. But they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the uncorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man, and of birds, and four-footed animals, and crawling creatures. Therefore God gave them over in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. For they exchanged truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason God gave them over to degrading passions, for their women exchanged the natural function for that which is unnatural. And in the same way also the men abandoned the natural function of the woman, and burned in their desire toward one another, men with men committing indecent acts, and receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. And just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind, to do those things which are not proper, being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful, and although they knew the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also give hearty approval to those who practice them.
Right? Ouch. That's 132 describes pride.
Yeah, I mean, it's just there. And I am having some exciting, for me anyways, exciting Bible studies, talking to people who are coming here and have really not heard the Bible before. And the conversations are just marvelous. And one of the things is I thought God was so loving. And yet, all we hear about is his wrath and his anger. And when you're preaching, you are constantly talking about blood. Everything's blood. It's all about blood. How loving can that be? And I said, well, first of all, you need to understand that in the Old Testament, God was trying to maintain a group of people somewhat purity-wise because they were going to produce the Messiah. And there were so many people who wanted to kill this nation. And God had to take steps. But he never killed anyone but that he didn't already know if Jesus himself was standing in front of them, who they would choose. Jesus or the devil. God knows that. Well, how does he know that? Because he's omniscient. He knows everything. Yeah, but why then? I said, if you went to the doctor and the doctor said, you have a tumor that's killing you, and you got a choice. I could operate and take that tumor away, or we can just let it go, and that would be it. What would you want to do? And these are younger people, and so I'm automatically saying, cut it out, cut it out. I said, yeah, but you know there's going to be a lot of blood. A lot of blood. I don't care. I don't care how much blood, as long as they get the tumor. I said, wow, what a wonderful answer. Because you see, for God, there was a lot of blood with his son. And it was all worth it to get that tumor we call sin out of our life. He goes, wow, is that in the Bible? I said, yes, it's all there. They said, how come we've not ever heard or seen or understood that before? Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. And Paul explains it to us. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Sally, would you read verses 18 through 21, please?
For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, the intelligence of the intelligent I will frustrate. Where is the wise person? Where is the teacher of the law? Where is the philosopher of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe.
You cannot come to God through intelligence. Through intelligence. In fact, sometimes intelligence is a stumbling block. Because people will say, oh, I'm too smart. I'm too smart for that. I like that when they say that, because they're smarter than me. I'm too smart, Bruce. I'm too smart to believe that. Okay, well, then, Sally, would you read verses 22 through 25?
Jews demand signs, and Greeks look for wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But do those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God? For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. How far did you say, Bruce?
What? Keep going. Right down to 29.
Okay. Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of the world and the despised things and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him.
Okay. Well, yeah. When we slow down enough, no matter how smart or how powerful or how rich or famous, whatever it is, when we slow down enough that God can get our attention, then His Holy Spirit works in our life to try and call us. And if we listen to that call, then we're transformed. Because when we listen to Him call and we answer, then he can do something with us. I buried a man on Monday that had been a lineman, not football, a lineman, climbs up the poles for 35 years. Loved his job because he saw his work as helping people. And of course I got asked, and you know why. So as I'm talking to the family to end this message before we go to the cemetery, I said, you know, this person helped thousands, because we all know the feeling that we get when the power goes out. I mean, we were worried, we're anxious, we're nervous, we're scared. It runs the gamut of feelings. We're so dependent on electricity. It really affects us. And this man helped relieve all of that in thousands of people. But do you know that he could only change the outside of a person's life? He couldn't change the person. But today, if he could come back and talk to you one more time, I know exactly what he would say. When Jesus tries to get your attention because the power in your life has gone out, turn to him and let him come into your life, and he can give you a power greater than you've ever imagined. And those people were just, I'm standing there, and there's a whole bunch of linemen that had worked with him over the years. They were all lined up because I had researched and did a whole piece on what the lineman does and what his responsibilities were. And they said, wow, I've been a lineman for 10 years and I learned some things today that I didn't even know. I said, but did you learn about Jesus? And they said, boy, that gives us a lot to think about. But you see, Gentiles are looking for smart things and smart people. And that's their downfall. Because God has simple things. And that's why he picked me. They don't come much simpler. And I love how Paul explains that, because it's God who chooses things that we wouldn't normally pick. Now, let's go to chapter 50 of Jeremiah, because I promised Kate I'd get through this tonight. Jeremiah chapter 50. And Babylon has come in. When Jeremiah is writing this, he's in Egypt with the remnant that ran to Egypt to escape. He's down there. And he's writing this, and he's writing it to the Babylonians, even though they're not going to hear it. But God's got a word for the Babylonians, because they still have 50 or 60 years of their empire to go yet. And God says, just so you know, fellas, the reason that you have taken my children and killed and maimed and dispersed them all over is because I'm disciplining them. I'm spanking them. And you're the walloper. You're the hickory switch. You're the wooden spoon. Whatever it was that was used on you. That's what you are, Babylon. And I've got news for you. When I'm done disciplining them, you're no longer needed. You're no longer useful. You're done. You're over. And this is what he says. So, Emily, would you read verses 2 through 5?
Declare and proclaim among the nations, proclaim it and lift up a standard. Do not conceal it, but say, Babylon has been captured, Bel has been put to shame, Marduk has been shattered. Her images have been put to shame, her idols have been shattered. For a nation has come up against her out of the north. It will make her an object of horror, and there will be no inhabitant in it. Both man and beast have wandered out, they have gone away. In those days and at that time declares the Lord, the sons of Israel will come, both they and the sons of Judah as well. They will go along weeping as they go, and it will be the Lord their God they will see.
And 5.
They will ask for the way to Zion, turning their faces in its direction. They will come that they may join themselves to the Lord in an everlasting covenant that will not be forgotten.
And of course, throughout Old Testament and even then into Revelation, and Ezekiel and Revelation have some real similarities in it. But what Babylon represents in the Bible is what? Evil. And especially Satan. Yeah, Babylon is that serpent. That's Satan. And notice what he says here in verses 4 and 5, that because, Satan, I used you as the wooden spoon, as the belt, as the walloper, my children are coming back to me, and they're seeking me, not you. And you're done. And I don't know if I don't know if Daniel got a chance to read any of that, but I'm sure that Ezekiel had heard about it, because Ezekiel, if you want to go to your thing here, the background to Ezekiel, and Katie was good enough to find me a map, so I want to show this to you. Ezekiel was, Jeremiah had been preaching, prophesying about 4 years in Jerusalem when Ezekiel was born. So there's quite a bit of difference. And on the back, it didn't come out well because it was color on my screen, but you can't really see the colors here. Prophets of the captivity. But you got Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. They're the big three. They're the big three in terms of prophets. And so Zephaniah, they chart him at about 640 BC. And while he's prophesying, Nahum comes on the scene, and also Jeremiah. And then during Jeremiah's time, Nahum, Zephaniah, Habakkuk, Daniel, and Ezekiel all are prophesying. And when Jeremiah ends, Daniel is still going, and then Ezekiel, and of course Daniel runs the gamut for those people. When Babylon first came in, the first group they took, there was about 10,000 of them, and they were the upper echelon, and they were potentially influential movers and shakers. And Nebuchadnezzar pulled them back, and you see where Judah, where Jerusalem is? I wish I had my little thing. You see over here in the corner, it's got the Nile River and Egypt, and then Judah. You see it? Yeah, you got it. Okay. Well, just follow that little line up Carchemish, that's going to be a huge battle that we've talked about before in Jeremiah. And you come on down, and they hauled those first group, and it was about 606, I think that's what I've got, yeah, 606 BC. And they take them to Babylon. It doesn't show on this map, but right underneath Babylon, you see where it says the Kebar Canal? That, when they come in 597, and they scoop up Ezekiel, he's not started prophesying yet. He's just a boy. Probably, I say a boy, he's probably in his early 20s. They scoop him up, and they put him in a concentration camp, but it's not like we think about with the Jews from the Nazis. This was a concentration camp where Ezekiel's going to own his own house. And they had gardens, and they had self-sufficient things that they could do and work and live, but they are captives. So it's kind of like a medium security prison. You can come and go and do as you please. You just can't leave the state. You've got to be there. That arrow on the Kebar Canal, if you come back to where the base of the point is, that is where is that? What's the name of that town? I have it on my other map. Oh, I'm so not smart. Anyways, that's where he's living. And it's a little town south of Babylon on the Kebar Canal, which feeds into the Euphrates River. And Daniel is in Babylon. Jeremiah is in Egypt. And Ezekiel is right there on that Kebar Canal. And he's praying. He's meditating on God. He's a captive, a prisoner. And he was all ready to become a priest. He was from a priestly family. And he was going to become a priest. And they tore the temple down. You can't be a priest without a temple. So instead of being a priest, God turned him into a prophet. But the third thing he was a prisoner. But he wasn't bemoaning that fact. He was there contemplating. So, Tony, would you read the first 3 verses of Ezekiel chapter 1?
Now it came about in the 13th year, on the 5th day of the 4th month, while I was by the river Chebar along to exile. The heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. On the 5th of the month, in the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's exile, the word of the Lord came expressing to Ezekiel, the priest, the son of Buz, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar, and there the hand of the Lord came upon me.
What do you think? What do you think it means when it says that the heavens opened? What do you think that means? I think that I've got it here in my notes that Ezekiel was I think that Ezekiel was I got it. I found it. Of all the Old Testament prophets, Ezekiel was the only one that saw the heavens open. And it only happened 3 times in the New Testament. Nope. First one in the Old Testament was in the Jordan River. Who was it? It was when Jesus was baptized and the heavens opened. The second one was early in the book of Acts. And there was a man being killed. Stephen. And the heavens opened. And then, of course, the last one is the youngest disciple who was still living by 90 A.D., living on the Isle of Patmos, John. And he saw the heavens open. Anybody ever had an experience that you would classify like that? Have you? You don't want to say it because you think you're crazy, right? Yeah. Yeah. I went through a real bad time in my life. It was just hard to even describe. And my 2 boys were taken away from me. And we're going to talk about this next week, about false assurances, because I lived under one. When my boys were taken, I went to bed that night just crying. I couldn't stop crying. And I was really upset because I living under a false assurance. I was blaming God, and God had nothing to do with it. When I was laying there, the ceiling in my bedroom disappeared. And a gigantic Bible appeared. And I looked at the alarm clock, and it said midnight. And I could kick myself of all the questions I could have asked God. I was so stupid and so selfish and so self-centered. I said to him, to God, why did you let this happen? And you know me, I've preached this for years. I am all about this book. I believe it with all my heart. And every answer to our questions is here. And so, why not? This Bible that took the place of my ceiling, there was a hand that just turned the pages. And when I'd ask a question, it would just turn the pages, and then this finger would come right down to a verse and answer that question. I thought that that must have been about, not even a minute. It was so fast. When I looked at the clock again, it was 4 in the morning. 4 hours. That seemed like less than a minute. Because you see, when we get to eternity, time will be no more. But that's the closest thing I can imagine to the heavens opened. And I have no idea what it must have been like not to see a Bible, but to see the throne room of God. And that's exactly what Ezekiel saw. So that's it. We're done.